recently. As I've said several times before, I did this for a long time as a lawyer before I got on the bench, but it's been a while since I've been in a criminal division, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anything new as far as case law over the past few years. I'll certainly give you all a chance to provide that to me if you want this morning. I'm not sure how the sequence of events is going to go as far as what witnesses are going to be called and how long it's going to take, but I'll certainly give you all time if you think you need to provide me with anything, and then I'll make a ruling sometime before that person testifies or not.
And Judge, do you want to hear the issue of a rebuttal case now, or do you want to wait until after the witnesses testify? The state does not believe that the defense does get to put on a rebuttal case. The state certainly did not get to do it in the prima facie case. The state was not permitted to call witnesses. It was whether or not he had presented his prima facie case. It's the state's burden in the second part of a stand your ground hearing to present competent substantial evidence that allows the court to decide by clear and convincing evidence whether or not the state has overcome the prima facie case of immunity. That's the state's burden. It is solely the state's burden, and the state has either met their burden or not. This does not need to become a he said, she said, my rebuttal, his rebuttal, and that sort of thing. But I think in the interest of fairness and the interest of justice, if Mr. Williams is permitted to present a rebuttal case, the state should have been permitted to present a rebuttal case in the prima facie case.
Well, the prima facie case determination, as I talked about last week, it's simply presenting a prima facie case. It doesn't say that they have to prove it, and I think that's the case law that I talked about. I'm not sure if I studied the exact case, but I know I had read it that day, so I'm not sure if a rebuttal to a prima facie case is really something that's normally done. Part of the issue is this issue doesn't have a whole lot of case law that controls it. So I'll certainly think about that issue as well as we kind of go through this morning. And then if I ultimately decide, Mr. Williams, I'm not going to give you a chance to rebuttal, I'll certainly let you proffer what you think you would have put on as rebuttal had I let you do that. Again, I want to make sure I'm taking a look at it. This is not an issue that was brought up before this morning, so I'll take a look at it before we finish up.
Yes, sir.
And yes, Your Honor, the state has extensively researched that issue and was unable to find anything, but this is, as the court did say, this is a newer and developing body of case law.
And I've tried to research the issue in as general as I could to get all the issues into it. Unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of controlling authority as to how we're supposed to do these things. But I certainly want to give Mr. Norris and the state both a fair chance to put on their case. I would lean towards a rebuttal as possible because he doesn't have to put on everything as part of his prima facie case. He simply has to get over that relatively low hurdle. But if you put on evidence that's contradictory to that, I would think he'd have a chance to come back and say, well, that's not exactly the case. Otherwise, you could put on almost anything as long as it's admissible, and that would be the facts of the case. So that's the way I'm leaning, but I want to take another look at it before we make any final determinations of that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, anything else that we need to take up before we get started with testimony?
Judge, I don't believe so.
Okay,
Nothing
Ms.
from
Yandler.
the state. And the
Okay.
state would call Barbara McLamory Evans if you'll allow me to go get her.
Sure. I'm just going to,
And Your Honor, Victoria Kipker from FDLE she is an expert witness.
any issues with that, her remaining in, Mr. Williams?
Judge, traditionally, experts are allowed to remain, so I won't enter an objection.
Okay. And then who's the other gentleman?
This is Joshua Sheik. He's from our
Oh,
office.
okay.
Just observing.
Okay,
And Judge, behind me is Mr. Norris's father.
okay, that's fine.
He's just observing.
Just for the record, to make the record clear, for these FDLE witnesses, we do not have the actual swabs or the actual firearm, and that is to preserve the items for any potential trial or any exculpatory evidence that they may be tested for in the future.
We had discussed this previously, Judge. I was aware of it and have no objection.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you stand, raise your right hand? Swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but
I do.
your witness, Ms. Sandler.
Can you please speak into the microphone so we get an accurate recording?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you state your name for the record?
My name is Dr. Barbara McGlamry Evans.
Where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement at the Pensacola Regional Operations Center as a crime laboratory analyst in the latent print section.
How long have you been employed there?
I've been employed with FDLE for approximately 16 years, and 10 of them have been in my current position.
Can you tell the court a little bit about your education?
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science degree from Florida State University in criminal justice. I have a Master's of Science from St. Leo University, and I have a PhD from Capella University
What's your PhD in?
in public safety.
What training does one receive to become a latent print examiner?
So my training program consisted of about a year and a half long. The first part of it in phase one was all academic readings, research, hands-on activities. And then the second phase, which was about 6 months long, was conducting supervised casework underneath another qualified latent print examiner.
Approximately how many latent print examinations have you performed?
So prior to becoming a latent print analyst in my current position, I also had examined latent prints before, and I had done, in that time, over 1 million comparisons of latent prints because we had to keep track of that.
Are your examinations peer or supervisor reviewed?
Yes, they are.
Are you up to date on your continuing education requirements?
Yes, I am.
This time, the state would move to allow Dr. McGlamry Evans to testify in the form of an opinion.
Objections, Mr. Williams?
No, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Dr. McGlamry Evans, can you, just to lay a foundation a little bit, can you tell us what a fingerprint is?
Yes. On the undersides of our hands and soles of our feet, we have raised portions of skin known as friction ridge skin. And a latent print is an area of that skin that's been left behind on the surface. It's an impression. We use development techniques to make those prints visible.
And can you tell the court what that impression is made of?
It's made of oils and residue that you pick up on your hands throughout the day.
Okay, so oil, residue, sweat, anything that might be on your fingers, it would leave behind a pattern of your finger.
Yes, that's correct.
Are the patterns of fingers unique to every individual?
Yes, the patterns are not, but the minute details that are within those patterns are.
And can you explain that?
Yes, so there are 3 main types of fingerprint patterns, loops, arches, and whorls, but within that are minute details such as bifurcations, which is when one ridge diverges into 2, and ending ridges, which is when a ridge abruptly stops. So those arrangement of those features is what makes a fingerprint unique.
And just to clarify, fingerprints are unique to every individual,
Yes,
even identical twins.
yes.
Did you have the opportunity to work on FDLE case number 2024-020-5581
Yes, I did.
and agency number OCSO 21OFF-012537?
Yes.
What did you do in that case?
I received a shotgun, and I examined it visually as well as processed it physically and chemically for the presence of latent prints.
And how do you do that?
So first, when I get the item, open and inventory it, visually conduct an examination, see if there's any ridge detail that can be seen before even processing begins. And in this case, I also used a full spectrum imaging system, which is a system that allows me to use ultraviolet light to be able to see prints that might not be visible without any chemical processing. And then after which, for this case, I conducted superglue fuming and then applied a dye stain to that and then powdered it.
Were you able to find any prints for comparison on this item?
There were no latent prints of value for comparison in this case.
And when you say no latent prints of value, what does that mean?
It means there was ridge detail present on the item, but that it didn't have enough information in those prints to be able to compare it to anyone, to be able to identify or exclude.
Do you recall where those areas were on the item that you may have seen even traces of latent?
No.
And in your record keeping, are you required, when you don't find any latent prints of value, to keep a record of where you find even traces of latent prints?
No.
Can you tell the court what kind of surfaces are conducive for fingerprints?
So the best surfaces are smooth surfaces that are clean, that are able to receive the latent print residue.
And why might prints not be left behind on an item?
So there's a number of factors. One would be if somebody was wearing some kind of covering over their hand. Environmental factors come into play, if it's too hot, too cold, if there's, wind, rain, anything like that. And also the subject, the person factors as well. If their hands, if they have a condition like eczema or anything like that, or their hands are really dry, might not have the residue to leave behind, or if they just wash their hands, there might not be enough residue to leave behind either. And also surface factors like texture of the item.
And what textures are not conducive for leaving behind?
So anything with a rough texture is not conducive. So if it's very bumpy or anything like that, if it's a dirty surface, it's less likely to have a print left behind.
And do you analyze items for palm prints as well as fingerprints?
Yes.
Are palm prints considered the same as fingerprints as far as identification?
Yes.
Are they-
Palm prints are just as unique as a fingerprint.
And did that conclude your analysis of this item in this case?
Yes, it did.
Okay, and was that Agency Exhibit 13
Yes, 013.
and FDLE item number 1?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you, just to be clear, that you used super glue to try to find a print on it, and that you also used a powder?
Yes, so the first thing I did was a visual examination. Then I used the full spectrum imaging system. Then I used super glue fuming. I used a fluorescent dye stain, and then powder.
Are these all the tools available at your disposal to try to find fingerprints on an item?
They are the best available that I have, yes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Your Honor. And for the record, Dr. McGlamory Evans' report was attached to the state's response as State's Exhibit D.
Doctor, can you spell your last name for me, please?
Sure. Last name is spelled McGlamory-EVANS.
All right, Mr. Williams, did you have any cross-examination for the doctor?
Just quickly, Judge, just want to make sure, when you, let me go up to the podium since we're on Court Smart. When you say that you use palm prints and fingerprints the same, when you say that you found no fingerprints, does that include that you found no palm prints either?
Yeah, there's no ridge detail of value for comparison, so that would include palm prints as well.
And does that include everywhere on the firearm?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Anything else based on that, Ms. Sandler?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
This witness free to go.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Williams, anything else with this witness?
No, Your Honor.
All right, and you're free to go.
Thank you.
All right, next witness, Ms. Sandler.
State calls Victoria Kipker.
Right hand, do you swear or affirm?
I do.
There, make sure you speak into that microphone for us.
You state your name for the record.
Victoria Kipker, that's Kipker.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed in the biology section of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement at the Pensacola Regional Operations Center.
How long have you been employed there?
I have been employed at this location since December of 2015.
What are your primary duties and responsibilities?
As a biology analyst, my primary responsibilities are to examine items of evidence for the possible presence of biological material. This could be things like blood, semen, saliva. I can even take samples of an item to determine who might have touched or handled or worn an item. I then subject these samples to DNA testing. I generate DNA profiles, make comparisons between the profiles in a case, write reports, and testify in court.
What is your educational background?
I earned a bachelor's degree in biology from the Florida State University in 2013.
And what kind of specialized training do you have to prepare for your duties as a forensic DNA analyst?
Upon appointment to the crime laboratory analyst position, I underwent an approximately year-and-a-half-long training program that's specific to the responsibilities of a biology analyst.
Approximately how many DNA tests do you believe you've conducted?
At my last count, it was over 6,000.
And is DNA deoxyribonucleic acid?
That is correct.
And is DNA unique to every individual?
With the exception of identical twins, yes, it is unique to each individual.
Do you undergo proficiency testing?
I do.
And are you up to date on your continuing education requirements?
Yes.
This time the state would move to allow Victoria Kicker to testify.
No objection, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Ms. Earl.
And you just told us that DNA is individual to everybody except identical twins, right?
Correct.
So tell us how you make a DNA comparison.
Sure. So after I've taken a sample from an item of evidence, I'll use heat and chemicals to break open any cells that are found on that item, releasing the DNA into solution or liquid. Then I use a series of instruments to determine how much DNA is present on an item, and then further on to get a DNA profile in a case. I then make comparisons between these DNA profiles in a case. So the DNA profiles look a lot like peaks on a graph. So I'm either comparing the peaks from one item to usually a known standard of an individual if it is suitable for comparison.
So you said you compare to a known standard. So basically you take somebody who's known, an individual, and then you compare it to a sample that you've received.
Correct. If that sample is suitable for comparisons, yes.
Okay. So if you're able to pull a full profile out of that sample, you can compare it to the known. And then if we like to use the term match, but what term do you use?
We can use match if it is a single source. I can also exclude an individual. I can also include somebody to a mixture. There can also be mixtures that are too limited in information for comparisons, and also there can be mixtures that are too complex in nature for comparisons.
Can you tell the court about the relationship between DNA and blood?
Sure. DNA is found in your blood. The primary source is from white blood cells that are circulating throughout your bloodstream.
Okay. And does blood contain a high concentration of DNA?
I would say that yes, blood does contain a high concentration of DNA when you compare that to something like skin cells left behind after touching an item.
So if you have a small amount of blood, are you able to pull a full profile out of that generally?
I would say that generally if I have even a small amount of human blood, I would expect to get a comparable profile rather than if it was, brief contact touching an item, yes.
Have you had cases in the past where you had a very small amount of blood and you were able to pull out an entire profile?
Yes.
Approximately how many would you say?
It's difficult to remember all the cases. I think I've done probably close to 1,000 cases at this point, but I know of a few off the top of my head that I've worked a small amount of blood and gotten comparable results and sometimes complete profiles, yes.
And in some of those cases, have you actually done the swabbing of the items and the swabs didn't come from another agency?
That is correct, yes.
And when we talk about small, how small are we talking about?
I don't know the exact amount of blood that you would need to get like a full profile or comparable results, but I know I have gotten a full profile off of something as small as like half the size of a pencil eraser stain-ish.
So a very small amount.
Yes. In my opinion, that would be a very small amount.
Now, did you have the opportunity to test items from FDLE number 2024-020-5581?
I did, yes.
And that corresponds with agency number OCSO 21-OFF-012537.
Correct.
And in that case, were you given buccal swabs from Ronald Norris,
I was.
agency number 4,
Correct.
and buccal swabs from Joseph McCombs, agency number 8?
Yes.
Are those the knowns in your case?
Yes, those are the knowns.
Okay. Did you make a comparison of those knowns to any items?
I believe the only item that I was able to make comparisons to was swabs from the trigger and stock of the firearm.
Okay. And what were you able to determine from those swabs from the trigger and stock of the firearm?
Sure. So the trigger and stock of the firearm demonstrated the presence of a mixture consistent with 2 donors, including at least 1 male contributor. I then compared the profiles of Ronald Norris and Joseph McCombs independently to that mixture. I included Ronald Norris as a possible contributor to that mixture, and that observed mixed DNA profile is greater than 700 billion times more likely to occur if the sample originated from Ronald Norris and 1 unrelated individual than from 2 random, unknown, unrelated individuals. When I compared Mr. McCombs' profile to that, I wasn't able to visually very clearly include or exclude him, so I used the statistical software program, and that comparison failed to generate enough statistical support in either favor of exclusion or inclusion, so therefore I cannot make any determinations as to Mr. McCombs' contribution to that mixture.
Now, since you were unable to include or exclude Mr. McCombs, did you test these swabs for the presence of blood as well?
I did, yes.
Did they come up positive for the presence of blood?
Both the swab from the barrel of the shotgun and the swabs from the trigger and stock failed to give chemical indications for the presence of blood.
How sensitive is that test for the presence of blood?
So the test that I'm performing in literature is as sensitive as up to 1 to 1 million.
So if there was even a tiny amount of blood, you would expect to get a positive result on that test?
Yes, and part of the training program is examining the limits of the test in real life, not just in literature, and I was able to get results down to at least 1 to 1,000 in my recollection.
Now, on the barrel of the shotgun, what were your results for that?
So the barrel of the shotgun, again, it failed to give indications for the presence of blood, and I did obtain a mixture from that item. However, due to the limited nature of that mixture, it is not usable for comparison purposes.
And explain what you mean by limited nature of that mixture.
So the DNA profile is made up of peaks on a graph, and I'm making comparisons to knowns within a case. If the mixture demonstrates so few peaks that it's not of value for comparisons, it would be similar to trying to match a phone number, but the only information you got was 850. There's lots of things that might be able to be matched or included. It's just not of good discriminatory value.
It's just not good enough for you to be able to say anything about it.
That's correct.
Okay. So if you had blood, would you expect to be able to pull out an entire profile?
If there was enough human blood on that swab to generate a positive reaction for blood, I would expect to at least get something for comparison purposes, if not a profile, yes.
Okay, so do you sometimes have cases where you get a positive finding for blood, but you're unable to pull out a profile?
Yes.
So your blood test is extremely sensitive.
Yes, I would say that the test for blood is more sensitive than the DNA testing that I perform.
And just to make sure I'm clear, and if you tested for blood, you would expect to get a profile. I may have already asked that, but I just want to make sure that I understand.
Yes, if there was enough human blood on there to generate a good positive reaction for the presence of blood and it is of human origin, I would expect to get some DNA results that were at least comparable.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so now with regard to testing the barrel, do you know where on the barrel the swab came from? Was that marked in any way or provided to you in any way?
No, sir. If you allow me to refresh my memory with my notes, I can check
Certainly.
to see if there was any other markings on the packaging. No, sir. My notes only say swabs, barrel, shotgun. That was all the information I was provided.
Were you provided more than one swab from the barrel? And was that differentiated by a different evidence number or ID number?
There were 2 swabs in that item that were represented as coming from the barrel of the shotgun, and I tested both of the swabs.
And just to make sure that I'm understanding, both swabs were negative for the presence of blood,
Correct, they failed to give indications for blood.
and you're using a chemical reagent for that, similar to luminol or something like that?
Yes, it is a 3-step chemical color change test called the Kastle-Meyer test.
And in terms of epithelial cells, things that you might otherwise obtain DNA from, there was insufficient, well, I think you said that you were able to determine that there was a mixture, but you couldn't isolate the mixture to 2 or more individuals.
That's correct. There was a mixture obtained, however, it was insufficient for comparison purposes.
Is there any particular effect on your ability to obtain DNA evidence based on the presence of, for example, gun oil, things of that nature that are commonly found on firearms?
To my knowledge, I have not had trouble with obtaining DNA profiles off of firearms or anything else that might be oiled, although I, at the time, don't know of the status of the item, whether or not it has any of those materials present.
All right. Do you recall anything unusual about the barrel of the shotgun in terms of excessive amounts of oil or body tissue or anything like that on it?
I only received the swabs of the shotgun. I didn't get to examine the shotgun itself.
Gotcha. I understand. All right. Thank you very much.
Anything else, Ms. Sandler?
One follow-up. If there was any blood in any way on that swab, would you expect to pull out a full profile?
If there was enough human blood on there to render a good positive Kastle-Meyer test to give chemical indications for blood, I would expect to get DNA results that I could use for comparisons. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judge, if I could ask, ma'am, make sure. Oh, yeah. I'll call and ask you what. Thank you.
You ready for your next witness?
State calls Todd Padilla, Investigator Todd Padilla. I believe he is
Padilla.
Sergeant Todd Padilla now.
Okay. This Leon get
Yes. While he's coming for the record.
Yeah, I've already seen it.
And why?
Well, because you need to know the right.
I want to make sure I mark it correctly, Your Honor.
Clerk has Y as the diagram, I believe.
Okay, so this will be Z?
I do.
Make sure you speak into that microphone so we can all hear you. Go ahead with the questions, Ms. Sandler.
Can you state your name for the record?
Todd Padilla,
Where do you work?
Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office,
How long have you worked there?
8.5 years.
What is your current role?
I am a shift sergeant patrol supervisor.
What was your assignment in August of 2021?
I was part of the major crimes unit for the Criminal Investigations Division.
Were you called to a homicide on August 25th of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was your involvement on August 25th of 2021?
I was the lead investigator, and I conducted the interview.
And did you interview Mr. Ronald Norris?
I did.
And where was that interview?
That took place at the Livingston substation.
Was that interview recorded?
Yes, ma'am.
How was it recorded?
We have cameras within the interview room, and we had utilized those cameras to record the interview.
Is that a camera like up in the corner of the interview room?
Yes, ma'am.
And it audio and video records?
Yes.
And was there anyone else present during that interview?
Also, Investigator Kruger was with me.
How long was that interview?
I believe it was just over 3 hours.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Did you recognize this?
Yes, ma'am.
And for the record, this is State's Exhibit Z, a disc. How do you recognize this?
Well, I had signed the cover packaging for it.
Did you review this?
Yes, ma'am.
And are those your initials on the front?
Yes,
Is this a true and accurate representation of that interview, Mr. Ronald
it
Norris?
is.
And been changed or altered in any way?
No.
Is it the interview in its entirety?
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, State moves to State's Exhibit Z for the court.
Judge, there's no basis for an objection, other than at trial, there'll be another issue, but for our purposes today, no objection.
You will be admitted without objection.
Sir.
Those are my only questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Any questions for him, Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams, any questions for him?
Just Officer Padilla, at the initial portions of the video, looks like Mr. Norris was not Mirandized by you, but you Mirandized him several minutes into the video. Is that correct?
I don't recall. I'd have to go back and look at that beginning portion for you.
At the time that you conducted the interview, was he brought in handcuffs, and y'all removed the handcuffs there in the interview room?
I don't recall. I believe the deputies may have done that. I'd have to go back and check.
All right. Was it your position that he was not free to leave?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Anything based on that, Ms. Sandler?
No, Your Honor.
This witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
No objection.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you, sir.
Any other witnesses, Ms. Sandler?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Can you all approach?
For more than 70 years, the sweet aroma of the Crestview Coney Islands burgers and hot dogs has permeated the downtown area. If you have not experienced the unique flavor of Crestview's Coney Island's burgers and hot dogs, then I encourage you to join us for lunch. Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m., Friday from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m., and Saturday from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. We're located in historic downtown Crestview at 107 North Main Street. Call 850-683-1045.
CQ Roofing, your hometown roofer since 1999. We're state licensed and insured, family owned and operated with 24 years of local service. We specialize in shingles and metal, re-roofs, repairs, and leak specialists. For all of your roofing needs, call us today or visit our website at cqroofing.com. CQ Roofing, your hometown roofer.
Hey, I'm David at Family Vision of Crestview. We've been providing excellent optical service for Northwest Florida for over 34 years. Come in and let us take care of you.
This is Tiffany Woodham, State Farm's newest agent in Crestview. I'd like to personally invite you to stop by my office for a no-cost policy review. Let me help you start saving today. Call in, walk in, or click in at yourcrestview.agent.com.
Alex Barthay from the UPS store once again, and I wanted to let you know about our Sunday hours. We're open now 7 days a week. Normal hours that you've been expecting, but now we're open Saturday 10 to 4, Sunday 10 to 3, and it's both our Crestview, Fort Walton Beach, and Eglin Air Force Base locations. So you have things to do, go and do it. Just know the UPS store is going to be here. Again, Sundays 10 until 3 p.m.
For years, I proudly served Florida as a state trooper. During that time, I investigated over 1,000 car, motorcycle, and trucking crashes. My mission was simple, to help the victims. Now, as an injury attorney, I can do even more to help accident victims. Hi, I'm attorney Coy Browning. If you've been injured...
All right, just wanted to work out some logistical issues as far as how we're going to proceed. At this point, State, are you basically resting your case as far as your evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Given the fact that I haven't reviewed the 3 hours of video. So what we're going to do at this point is take a recess. I'm going to review the video. Obviously, it's pretty lengthy. I'm not going to require everyone to sit here and watch me watch it when you've already seen it. There hasn't been an expressed desire to do so. But I would expect what we'll do is to give myself at least 3 hours to review it. We'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. At that point, we'll talk about the potential witness in rebuttal from Mr. Norris's side. So if y'all need time to review that issue, and then we'll talk about that once we come back. Again, I don't expect to make a ruling today because I have to review my notes and the evidence that was brought in last week, but we'll talk about how we're going to go through that as well. So just prepare to talk about that at 2 o'clock. Was there any other issue that we have to take up before we recess?
None from the state, Your Honor.
Judge, the defense doesn't have anything.
All right, then we'll be in recess until 2 o'clock, and we'll reconvene at that point so that we can proceed with if there's going to be more evidence, and we'll discuss potential arguments as well. Anything else?
Nothing from the